welcome back to the channel, Bridging the Gap, Student to Engineer, where STEM professionals provide advice to students. This video is a school deep dive into Texas Tech University. This is a public university in Lubbock, Texas. This school is the flagship institution for the Texas Tech University system, which has locations in several places across Texas, but the main one that we usually refer to is the one in Lubbock, so that's the one we'll look at today. Before we get into it, please like the video, subscribe, leave some comments to indicate that you're engaged and to let us know what questions you have about this. Okay, before we get into the data, I'll just say a few things. We will be going through a couple web pages within the university's website in search of data that will help us determine what the student outcomes are for engineering. A lot of the data they provide is for the entire university rather than the school. And so we'll just make some assumptions or draw some tentative conclusions based on what we're seeing. But let's just get into it, and then we'll talk more about it as we go through the data. We're going to start with the Texas Tech University Institutional Research page, where they talk about graduate outcomes. So this is something where we essentially see a PDF or a stagnant piece of data as we click through the top. What they are doing here is they're making it pretty friendly, where graduates work and what they earn, so we can click through this whole thing. What we cannot do is filter for the School of Engineering. Texas Tech, despite its name, is not a technical focused university. It is not STEM focused. There are 9 colleges outside of the Honors College. And so there's quite a diversity of majors that students can undertake. But just if we take this data as representative of all the schools, then we can just say there are quite a number of states where Texas Tech grads go and where they are a year after graduation. What this does not say is if it's 1 year worth of data or a lot of years worth of data. I am assuming that it is multiple years worth of data, and they are looking at where they've ever sent 10 grads to be employed. I don't know that. I can't tell that from the data, but just seems like that's maybe the more conservative way of looking at this. So if we do look at what we have in front of us, the grads are spread out across the U.S. The states where we typically see a lot of grads go are covered, which is Texas, where the school is, and California and Washington. Those are usually the biggest states for engineering grads. And then there are a lot of states on here represented, so pretty diverse, and we can assume that Texas Tech engineering grads are able to go anywhere across the country. And then what they do have is this interesting graphic that I haven't seen at any other school, so it's just a point of interest. Again, we cannot filter for the school, so we can't filter for just engineering grads. What we can filter for is a number of years since the graduation. So before I click any of these, what I want to point out is that the largest is mining and petroleum. And then we've got utilities after that. It appears that the size of the circle is the income, the median salary, not necessarily the number of grads that go in there, but it is also hard to tell, and that information is not made available. But at year 1, you can see there's quite a variety of industries that grads are in. Everything from retail and real estate to the ones I mentioned, mining and petroleum, utilities, professional services, information. So it's pretty widespread. And what I do not see in here is defense and space or aerospace type industries. It's possible that they are rolled into the other ones, but typically those are separated out. So I'm going to, again, make the assumption that there aren't a lot of grads from Texas Tech University at all as a whole in any major that go into any sort of aerospace profession right out of school. Now then what I'm going to do is click on tenures, just because this jumps. What you see is there's a pretty significant consolidation of the industries that the grads are in. I don't know exactly what this says, except for that it's possible that grads who are more involved in the school and that are responding to a survey in 10 years are in certain industries, or that maybe some of the industries that have dropped off are not as people haven't stayed in them long term. They may have gone into it right out of school, but they moved into something else. But with the information that we have, you can see pretty quickly that the median salary in mining and petroleum is pretty high, 220,000. This is pretty typical for that industry. It is a pretty high risk industry that goes up and down significantly based on the demand for petroleum products. And mining would be more of the materials and the metals and the minerals that we're digging out of the ground. But those are definitely very, very much cyclical with the market. There's a lot of outside factors that can contribute to a sudden collapse of those industries or a sudden expansion. So they do pay pretty well. They are typically pretty demanding from a time and energy standpoint. And the risk of having a long-term job in that is higher than some other industries. But if we look at the other industries here, professional, scientific, and technical services, a little over or around 120,000. Transportation and warehousing is about the same, and manufacturing about the same. Those three tend to be more stable than petroleum, but again, the median salary is significantly lower. That none of that is surprising, given what I know of those industries, but it is nice that Texas Tech gives us that information. That can give you a little bit more information about where you might see yourself in the future if you do go into one of those industries. I've clicked on average earnings in 1, 5, and 10 years after graduation, and also selected engineering majors from this compare different fields of study. So this is one place that we can choose the different majors, not by college within the university, but by major specifically. And so basically what we see here, you can see as I'm clicking on each one that it says the specific field of study, but these are the starting salary for each of the majors within the Texas Tech University School of Engineering. You can see that they are varied across the majors. This is pretty typical for any engineering school, and so none of this is surprising also, but the fact that petroleum engineering starts higher is also pretty typical for that industry. Again, going back to what I just said about petroleum being a higher risk and higher demand industry, definitely pays more than some of the other ones. And usually what we see is that civil is at the bottom or near the bottom. That's the case here, with industrial being not far behind. So as you're considering a major, if you are considering various majors within engineering, I would not be too concerned about the starting salary within a major, because these fluctuate a lot with the industry that you're going into. But do understand that, if you are majoring in petroleum engineering and you've got a friend that is getting a degree in construction engineering, when you get out, you'll probably be making different amounts of money. Your lifestyles will be different, and that will be reflected in your salary that you're getting when you get out. Another nice thing about this data is the 5 and 10 years after graduation. It can show you that everyone has career progression, and no matter what path you take after graduation, you have the possibility of having good growth in salary, and pretty quickly get into the levels where you're upper middle class or upper class in the data for U.S. Incomes. Recently got a question about whether or not schools pay differently depending on what school you go to, and I'm just going to point out here that a reminder that typically that is not the case. Typically employers will not look at the college you graduated from and pay you more or less than your peer. It is typically you just have an engineering degree from an ABET accredited institution or program, if that is required, and then they'll just pay you the same. The next thing we're going to look at is the Texas Tech University Office of Planning and Assessment. This is just a very long web page with lots of groups of data as we go down. I'm not going to look at all of this, but just a few things as we go. The undergraduate enrollment has been around 33,000 for at least 4 years. The student retention rate for undergrad students, again, this is across the entire university, not just engineering, so we don't know what it is specifically in engineering, but has been about 85% for the last few years. So the graduation rates and time to degree is something I really want to discuss about Texas Tech University. Typically, these numbers are lower in public schools, especially large public schools, as opposed to small private schools. Presumably, you'd get more attention at a small private school, and there may be more support. That is not always the case, but that's just a blanket statement and a generalization. Two large public schools that I can think of where that's not the case are Purdue and Colorado School of Mines. Their retention rates are pretty good. But Texas Tech shows us their retention rates going back several years, and they have a very sad, I think, target for your graduation rate. I'm not sure how you can stay in business if only 34 to 37% of your customers reach their goal in a way that you have stated is something that you're going to provide. So just as a general customer service organization, that seems very low. One thing that is positive is there is an upward trend here of the actual percent graduated within 4 years, going from 37 in 2014 as the cohort year, so that would be the year they enter, to nearly 50% in the 2019 cohort. Still very low numbers. I know there are a few universities that measure their success by the number of students who graduate in under 4 years. This doesn't seem to be too much the case with Texas Tech. But know going in that if it is a 4-year degree, the likelihood it will take you more than 4 years to get through that is pretty high. I know we tend to say it will not happen to me. I'll be fine. My student is self-motivated, whatever reasons you have behind it. But their performance and behavior in high school can change in college. And there are a lot of factors that go into this, including the availability of classes. So if you are looking at Texas Tech, I would consider the retention rate and the percent graduated within 4 years. Ask a lot of questions about that and ask about class availability, and maybe ask students what they're seeing for themselves and their friends for taking longer than 4 years to graduate. The next section is the undergraduate 6-year graduation rate. Typically, when this data is shown, there's a 4-year graduation rate and a 6-year graduation rate. I usually look at the difference between those because that difference is the people who just took a little bit longer but still got through in a what you could consider a reasonable amount of time. I'm going to scroll back up a little bit so we can see all of the data. But let's just look at the 2017 class. They had 44.5% graduated in 4 years, and then about another 20% graduated in that 6-year mark. 20% of the students that joined the school in 2017 took a little bit longer to graduate, but still graduated in a time that would be somewhat reasonable and is not beyond 6 years. If you have a student that's taking longer than 6 years to graduate, there's probably something else going on there than just it's taking them a little bit longer. It's harder to get through school. There's probably other things going on. But just something to be aware of with these two data sets, and know that if you do go here, Fewer than half of the students are going to be graduating in the 4 years that the school advertises it takes to complete the degree. You might consider that in your finances. But also, if you can, get this data for other schools because, again, like I said, you'll see that a lot of the small private schools will have much higher numbers here than the large public schools. Next section is student employment outcomes and job placement. This is usually what we focus a lot of our attention on in these videos on this channel. My first caution is this is for the entire university, not just for engineering. We will be able to filter on just engineering in the next group of data, but this is the only data we have where we have good, solid data that represents all students. So let's just look at it. Of the students graduating in 2023, their stated goal upon entering the university, so this is an interesting question. When you are a freshman, they're going to ask you, are you coming to the school because you want to get a job, because you want to go to grad school, or because you're just wanting to get some general information, general education, or is there another motivating factor? So of the students that graduated in 2023, 55% said they were coming there to get a job in the future. So that's what we're going to focus on. So let's go down to the next set of data. Okay, so of those students whose stated goal was employment when they entered the school, 58% of those had a job. So of the students that wanted a job when they came into the university, when they graduated, they had a job within 6 months of graduation. 32% of them are still looking for a job. Now, typically we compare this data for engineering schools. There are very, very few schools that have this high of percent of students that are graduating, they're still seeking employment. It's not really comparing apples to apples because this is not the engineering school, but this is, to me, a very concerning number. If this was just for engineering, I would say there are very few schools that have this low of a positive student outcome rate. Okay, and then the next would be of the students who went to college thinking they were going to get a job, 6.7% of them are continuing their education. So this happens for a few reasons. Sometimes, you're getting out of high school, you think you can't afford it, you just want to get through school, you maybe don't want to be a lifetime student. Maybe somewhere in your studies you realize that it would be better for your career to have a graduate degree. Maybe when you're about to graduate, you can't find a job, and so going to grad school is a good option. So there's a couple reasons why people might change. Maybe you fall in love with something, maybe you decide you like to do research, something like that. So it's not atypical for people to change their mind. What is concerning to me is that of the people who said that they were going to get a degree and entering the university so they could get employment are still looking for employment. Okay, the next set of data, the status of all student at the time of graduation. The previous data set was of those who initially said they wanted to get a job when they graduated in the future. This is saying every single student who is graduating, what is their status when they graduate? So 46% are employed or about to be employed. That means that they have a job offer, they just haven't started it yet. 23% are searching for employment, 26% are continuing their education. Again, this is all schools, not just engineering. If the 26% continue their education was just engineering, I'd say that's about average. So nothing concerning there. But I'll just go back to the searching for employment is a concern. So Texas Tech University provides us data that I haven't seen on other universities' websites, but since it's here, we'll talk about it. It's really nice that they do provide this. For undergraduate engineering students, what you want to do is take the state licensure exam before you graduate. This is the Fundamentals of Engineering exam. If you're able to take it right before you graduate, which most states allow you to take it in your last semester of your undergraduate engineering degree, Um, Once you have that fundamental engineering license, then you work 4 years and you are eligible to sit for the professional engineer license exam. You don't have to take the fundamental of engineering exam in college, but that depends states to state, and some schools require it. So that's a little bit of a background. If we look at the pass rates for the exam, so this is Texas Tech is looking at their engineering students who are taking the test in their last semester and how many of them are passing. Um, so 80% is not bad, but then we just significantly decline. And this last data set available, only 56% of their grads pass the fundamentals of engineering test. Just another red flag for me. Um, if you are going to become an engineer, if you want to get your PE license in the future, you're absolutely going to want to have this fundamental of engineering exam and licensure behind you. The scenario where you graduate not having passed this test, or you have taken it and not passed it, means that you have to not only start a new job, start your new life, but also study for that exam again. Some grads will also take jobs that are labeled as an engineering technician because they need to have the fundamental of engineering exam licensure behind them before they can become an engineering training officially at their job. So you may end up starting with a lower salary if that ends up being you. So again, your college prepares you for this exam. If only 57% of students who are taking it are passing, it's a concerning thing. The last thing we're going to look at is the Texas Tech University Institutional Research Graduating Senior Survey results. The senior survey results is where we typically get our information about if students are working or in school 6 months after graduation, how much they're making, where they're working, all of those types of things. So this is a very important survey. Um, on some of the private schools that we've seen, they have like a 96% response rate. Some of the schools are doing a very good job of staying with their alums. Some of them will do an initial survey right before they leave and then follow up if they don't have all the information 6 months later. So there are different ways for schools to get this data. What I'm seeing on the Texas Tech data is a very, very, very low number of student responses. The school had in the fiscal year 2023, 7,215 graduates that received undergraduate degrees, all received the survey, and only 595 responded to the survey. 8% response rate is not really considered a good sample. So while we will go through this because we are able to filter for engineering, it is very concerning that the sample size is so small. But the only thing at this point that we can do is make an assumption that the data that we're seeing is at least somewhat accurate and somewhat representative of the entire class. So I'm going to scroll down to this summary page just to point out one number, and that is the engineering school is about 12% of the total grads within that time. That's neither good nor bad. It is just an indication that engineering is about 12% of the overall school size. So I have come to the employment outcomes tab here and filtered for the College of Engineering. I am skipping some of these tabs on top, so if you'd like to look at them, I will provide the link in the description for the video so you can take a look at that. So for the College of Engineering fiscal year 2025, there's only 55 responses, so just highlighting again, that's not a very good sample size. But if we are to assume that that's representative of the graduating class, 23.64% seeking employment versus 76 employed is not a good number. We don't see very many schools where the positive student outcome rate is in the 70s. There are definitely some large schools that are around that number. So this is not entirely on its own here, but definitely a concern. Just to put that in perspective, if you went to Texas Tech University for an engineering degree and your intention was to get a job when you graduate, 1 out of 4 of the graduates, meaning either you or one of your few friends, are not going to have a job within 6 months of graduation. 6 months is a good benchmark because it's usually the time frame when you need to start repaying your student loans. So it is important for grads to have that job and that employment within that period of time. See, the other information they provide, new job versus continue job versus evaluating offers. This continue job is really about if you're employed and then you are going to school while you're employed versus graduating and finding a new job. So that's an interesting little tidbit. Not entirely telling us a whole lot, but something I wanted to explain a little bit. And then description of employer. Typically, schools will give us the industry, but this is just saying that 81% of those employed, again, a very, very small data set here with 42, but are in a business or industry rather than government, healthcare, military, or education. That is pretty typical for engineering grads. There are some places where you might have a little bit more higher percent going into the government, but I'm sure that that does not include government contractors, so maybe just more of a typical number. And then we'll go down here to job is related to the major, so 3.55 out of 4, a pretty decent number. Prepared for employment, so this is the grad providing just a subjective evaluation of if they were prepared for the job they have. This first one's out of a 4 scale and the second one's out of a 5 scale. So just make sure you're watching that when you're looking at these numbers. I would have hoped that more grads would feel like they were higher or more well prepared for the jobs than a 3.8 out of 5. Satisfied with the job, again, a very subjective, are you happy with where you're working? That may or may not have anything to do with the university, but it is a 3.43 out of a 4 scale. Okay, so because we're able to filter for just the School of Engineering, we can see what the average and median salary ranges are. Again, very, very small data set, but the income being in the 70,000 is about typical for engineering grads. I'd like to see it a little bit higher. There are a lot of schools with higher numbers, but not significantly higher. So this is pretty decent. So we're making a stop at the employment while attending TTU tab here. And I've filtered on engineering again. This may be somewhat of an explanation of why it's taking grads a little bit longer to graduate than the 4 years advertised. But basically what we're seeing is that about 3/4 of the engineering students at Texas Tech University are working. They're typically working to earn money to pay for school and living expenses, and they're typically working 11 to 20 hours a week. But some students are working more than 40 hours a week. Our next stop is at the Job Assistance tab. While I typically glean this information from the number of students that various companies hire, this is a direct result of a survey about whether or not students receive job assistance from the Career Center. So what I'm looking at is down here, received no assistance. So 39% of those who responded in all of Texas Tech University did not receive assistance from the Career Center at Texas Tech University. I would love to see much higher numbers than that. The Career Center should be very helpful to you when you're looking for jobs when you graduate, even before that when you're looking for internships. And they should be your your source for information about how to get a job, how to get an internship, and how to put your resume together, all of those things. I would really like to see it be higher here for Texas Tech University, but this is what the numbers are showing. That is all the data that we have for Texas Tech University. If you have any questions or know where we can get more information, please leave a comment, let us know. Also, like, subscribe, and share with a friend, and we will see you on the next one.